listening to this episode of the Billy Newman Photo Podcast for May 21st, 2018. My name's Billy Newman. You can find more of my work at billynewmanphoto.com. You can also see some more at Billy Newman on Instagram if you'd like to check that out. I'm trying to put up some more content up on Facebook. I'm interested in trying to check out some more videos too. I'm gonna see if I can try and bolster up my YouTube page, try and put some new things up there for 2018. But I thought I'd try and do a quick podcast today and try and put down some of my thoughts about some of the things that have been going on recently. You know, just this last week, I thought I'd give just a little update about it outside of photo news, but I just had the 6th anniversary of the Kelly Christensen Memorial Scholarship, which is a scholarship that I worked on with a couple other people, I guess now 6 years ago, back in, 2013, after an old high school teacher of mine had passed away. And so we put together a memorial scholarship to support students and stuff at our old high school. And it was great. We just had our 6th scholarship evening where we gave out a little bit of money for a scholarship to somebody who's going to university next year. So it was pretty exciting, but it was kind of cool. And I'm really happy that we got to kind of participate in that again this year. And yeah, it was just another one of those I guess kind of positive things that have sort of come to pass. So it was cool that some people had helped out trying to put that together. And yeah, it's pretty neat. It's cool that I don't know, we're giving a little bit back. I guess we've been doing it now for 6 years. Now we're going on 7, which is quite a bit more than I was ever even at my high school. So it's kind of fun moving through. But yeah, this weekend, I guess moving on from that, if you are interested in any of that, you can check out christensenscholarship.org. But moving on from some of that stuff, this weekend I did a photo trip up, I guess it was really just hiking. It's just kind of exploring, but it's really, I guess the best part of it, you're in town and you want to get out on a Saturday drive or a Sunday drive or an evening drive now that the sunset or, the sky's bright up until, I don't know, what is it, like nearly 8 o'clock or so now? So that's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy about that part of it. But yeah, so we went up to the Mackenzie River. So we went up Highway 126 out of Eugene and we passed Mackenzie Bridge and took the corner and went up a little ways. So I think we stopped at like the Sahaley Falls area, which is really, it's nice, especially right now. A lot of the snow is melted. We're kind of moving into late May and June. And so a lot of the snow up in the mountain range is definitely melted out by now. And there's a lot of those trails that are opened up, especially along the Mackenzie River. But it's a really beautiful, really lush, well-forested area up there in the Cascade foothills. And so it was fun jumping up into the Mackenzie River area, hiking on the trails for a while. And really, man, it's amazing to see just how blue and how crystal clear the water is, especially this early section of the early part of the season where there's a lot of fresh water coming down out of the mountains. There's just so much. The water, the rapids are just so crystal clear with like a blue-green kind of hue to the water. So that was fun. It was nice getting up there and to try and take some pictures for a while. But we were up there, I think, through a good part of the afternoon. It kind of sparked my interest, though, as sort of a near-by location that I should try and spend some more time. Get up to the upper Mackenzie River area and see if there's some interesting stuff I can explore up there. But a little additionally to that, I was looking at some of the river outfitters that are out there, and I was thinking, man, I should really take a chance and I should jump on one of these like river day trips that they have that go down the Mackenzie, since it's really a section of the river. I've never been on the Mackenzie River or the Umpqua or the Clackamas or really a lot of these other bodies of water that are up here in northern Oregon. And really, as rafting goes, I've only done some stuff in southern Oregon. So I was thinking about, man, I should really try and put in some time on the Mackenzie River, just given it how interesting it is, how I think really a lot of times it's kind of considered one of the world-class rivers to do a float on or to go hiking on. So it's really beautiful out there, but it was fun jumping up to the Mackenzie River and checking some stuff out. I think this time of year in May, it's really starting to come out. It's really starting to pop a bit more as we're moving into spring and moving into summer on some of these nicer days. But yeah, some really beautiful stuff up there. And then I'm putting up some more photos from like a commercial tulip shoot that I did a while back. And I'm really glad I got to work on that. I thought that was pretty fun. I did it for a job here at work where we had to get some marketing material for some motorhomes. So we got a really nice motorhome. We had it driven up to the tulip farm, which is at the Wooden Shoe. What is it, the Wooden Shoe Tulip Farm? The season's over now. I think it's kind of moved on. But for a while, while there was the tulips growing, this was like late April or so, we hit just a really beautiful, nice day, and got a motorhome and a truck and trailer up there, and spent the evening photographing it as the light was changing, but spent it photographing it against Mount Hood in the background, which those photos turned out really cool. I was really happy about that. And then also spent some time photographing the motorhome, this Newman Ventana. It's like $500,000 to get a motorhome like this, but it was cool putting it up in the field and kind of laying it out as a landscape, against the bright, colorful red tulips and, different colored rows of tulips. So it was fun working on something like that. There's a lot of variables and shoots like that, but yeah, that kind of commercial shoot stuff I really like. I really like the most, probably, or close to the most. I don't know. I like kind of the simpler. Well, I do like having some kind of structured event to sort of put in front of the camera. There's landscapes, which are great, where it's just that kind of pristine wilderness that you take a photo of. And I really like trying to capture that. But more than that, I really like trying to put some kind of object or some kind of subject in the photograph. It's what I'm learning now a little bit. So as rudimentary as it is, something like a cool motorhome in a picture, at least for a commercial picture where it's trying to market motorhomes, that's kind of the idea, instead of just the flat horizon line ahead of you. I'm trying to learn more about how to put something interesting in there that's sort of the draw of the attention. But it was cool working on that tulip photo shoot. One thing that I learned on that tulip photo shoot, though, was that, I spent a lot of the time working with the Sony A7R, and I talked about on this podcast maybe last summer when I was getting the A7R that it was a really cool camera. It's interesting. I like shooting with it. I like the high quality sensor that it has and the ability that it has to shoot in low light. But there's a select number of things that are really inadequate about the way that camera performs technically. And just given that it's a camera from 2012, 2013, it's just technically not as proficient as maybe it would have been at its time, or I don't know, something like that. But I think, suffice it to say, I think I'm going to sell that camera body. I'm going to try and move on to something else. And it's just sort of not for any personal or particular reason other than that professionally it isn't working adequately as a tool right now for me. So that's a big thought about what I need to work on. But I guess like a little more than that, or, a little wider thinking of it, it's like, it's a really good camera, but I have a huge amount of issues with the autofocus on the A7R. And I also have a lot of issues with the way that the electronic viewfinder works on that A7R. Well, or on the early A7 line of mirrorless cameras that Sony produced. There's just too much of a gap, too much of a blackout period when you're trying to take a picture or fire the shutter. And I don't have problems like that with the A6000. I don't have problems with that with the A7 II or A7R2 that I've rented and tried out a couple times for images. So I think what I'm going to do, and also additionally, maybe the most important point, is that the price of an A7R is depreciating rapidly. So I think what I'm going to consider is that I'm going to try and sell the A7R off before the value of it depreciates too much, and then I'm going to try and invest that money back into another camera body that I'll kind of hopscotch a little bit. So 2 years ago, I had a Nikon. Well, actually, even just 1 year ago at this time, I had a Nikon D3. Then I got an A7R, and now I'm going to try and kind of transition that money and maybe a little more into another kind of camera body. And I'm considering trying out I'm considering trying out Canon now. I had started with Nikon. I tried Sony for a while, and I'm considering now, I think, trying to move over to Canon to try and do some stuff for a while. So it'd be interesting, I think, just to try it. And maybe it's just an idea of trying to be more versatile, or I don't know, just more professional, more able to operate a wider series of equipment standards. I think is something that's interesting to me. So I've worked with Canon stuff professionally for years in the past, before, but I'm interested, I guess, in kind of pushing that a little further and using it as sort of the professional tool that I really lean against to try and get the professional work that I'm interested in. So that's one of the ideas that I'm working on, but I'm trying to move some money around and sell some equipment, sell some cameras and stuff, so I can try and put together a little pile of cash, put it all on the piggy bank at one time, and then move in on some nicer, probably used Canon body, and I hope Canon, a nicer Canon lens that I can get started, and that would really be a big start to do probably a lot of wedding work, or it's a pretty functional commercial camera. And I guess what I meant to say when I was talking about that tulip shoot and why it brought me into this point of maybe selling my Sony equipment is I love the Sony equipment for the low light, like I was talking about, and for some of the real specific use cases in landscape photography. But really, as an all-around camera, there's a lot of things that it lacks, and I'm sure maybe a lot of that's answered in a Sony A7 or a Sony A9 or a Sony A7R3, one of those newer cameras that has some of these issues specifically addressed. Because I think a lot of photographers talked about how this was a complication in the way that they would shoot. But what I noticed though is I had a Canon camera with me, or really just I guess for purposes of conversation, a standard DSLR, where it was a mirrored camera with the prism system, so I could see the subject the whole time and then fire the shutter when I wanted to capture that moment. And I just had a much harder time getting the autofocus system to work functionally, and in simple situations it wasn't really dynamic focus that I had to chase. It was just a landscape, just focus wide out, just focus, do anything, just focus. And then it couldn't do it, I'd miss the shot, or I'd get an out of focus shot. And I've just seen that happen dozens of times with the photographs I've tried to get with the Sony camera. And really that's just sort of like, oh, okay, this isn't working, I need to sell this. It's a cool camera. If I had to use it, I could get a lot of things out of it. Over the last year, I did use it and got a lot of things out of it. But I think now, specifically, I really need to push on maybe buying or investing in higher end glass lenses and higher end Canon bodies. So I don't know, I'm hopeful to do some of that stuff, but we'll see how it goes over the next month or so as I try and do a little equipment swap. It's a nice goal to have though. It kind of keeps me focused on something at least. But the other one I'm trying to figure out, and so this is the camera thing. Obviously photography is what I'm trained in, and sort of the discipline that I've tried to seek out is what I want to do the most. And new media is really a big interest of mine too. And what I've been looking into is some of the changing media opportunities that we're going to have in this next decade. And one of the things that we've not really been able to produce before, just one of the media types we've not been able to produce, even though I've messed around with it in sort of an amateur way, given a lot of the computer or computational photography that exists. But I'm really looking at 360 video. I've been kind of interested in this for about 2 years or so, but I haven't really thought that the equipment or just the camera gear was really there yet. But I'm really interested in not necessarily 360 photographs as much, though that could be really interesting too, especially with a lot of the, HDR, HDR images, but also HDR screens that are starting to come out, where you're able to display an image in a format with a wider variance of color gamut. It's really interesting how, it just got a wider amount of black to white that it can show. And apparently that, that can make a big difference to make things look, a little bit more representative of things that we see. And so I think when we were working with cameras like we do right now, the dynamic range is just so much less than our eyes that's why we see. That's why it looks poor. When you look at something that was maybe shot in a bright midday light, it just doesn't able to pick up the shadows and the brights as well. So it's kind of interesting new formats and new sensor technologies that we're able to get into that make things just more expansive and more capable. But as we move into 360 video, it's just a whole new threshold, or 4K 360 video. It's this whole threshold of stuff that I've not really worked on in media before. And I've not really, I guess what would it be? Like, I haven't rendered it, or I haven't brought a 360 video file. I haven't ever brought a 360 video file into like Final Cut Pro before. So I was trying that out this weekend, and I had to upgrade a lot of stuff. I had to upgrade my Mac to Mac OS High Sierra, which has been out for a long time, but I've been kind of delaying on that because I wanted to, I just had a stable system, and I try and use my computer for work a lot of times. So I really don't try and do updates that I don't have to do with some stuff. And I don't know. It's good that I waited 6 months to put ICR on it, but it runs fine. It runs stable. And really, I was most interested in trying to work on this 360 video project, which takes Final Cut 10.4, which is where they bring in some of those features for 360 video and VR editing and production. So it was kind of cool trying to check out, but oh my goodness, is that 13-inch MacBook of mine really struggling when it tries to render out even just 1 minute of footage, or when it tries to render in a 360 graphic element that's supposed to exist, in like on a dimensional plane. It's interesting. You can put text out into space in the in the three-dimensional, well, not three-dimensional, but in the 360 space, you can look to the north, let's say, and see words that are printed, or some kind of graphic that's laid out there and rendered into the frame, I guess is what you would call it, or into the virtual environment. It's just sort of stuck there. And so as you look around, as the video elapses, you'll see this graphic object layered into the frame. And I can only imagine what kind of processing it takes to really produce some of those effects in the back end. It's amazing that we're able to make, equirectilinear images? Equirectilinear, I think, is the format. I don't know. It's one of the formats that you see. That's where you see like the stitching of the two 180-degree images sort of melded together. And it's really interesting looking at that footage. And I guess a phone is a pretty effective viewer for it in the moment. But I'm looking at other stuff like I think it's the Gear, not the Gear VR. Well, there's the Gear VR, the HTC Vive. There's like the Oculus. I think it's Oculus, right? The Oculus VR. There's like a cheap one now. I was really impressed, or it was like $200. It was like $199 to get a screen and goggles to do some of this 360 video experience. And I'm trying to think about like business ventures that are sort of attached to this with a new medium that's sort of approaching. Like I think a couple years ago was the advent of aerial drone footage. Before then you had to get a helicopter and a gimbal, and that's $100,000 shot to get aerial footage over your property or whatever it is. And so now it's just so much more, I don't know, possible than it used to be. I remember watching, I don't know, I think there was like a movie that had this gimbal shot, and they talked about it in the the behind the scenes stuff, where they had this cable camera that ran for like 200 yards as it sort of swept in and sort of did this one shot through this long sweeping intro into like this this big opening scene. But they had this big cable camera. It ran across a football field, basically a whole action field, and they pulled this camera across, so it'd be this smooth kind of gliding shot that was just a little bit, I don't know, 20-30 feet above everyone, and they couldn't really pan it with just a crane. So they're talking about technically how they engineered this shot, and this was back in, I don't know, 1999, 2000, and now it's just that's an amateur ability where you can get a drone with a gimbal and put it 20 feet in the air and have it follow in for 200, 300 feet and have a perfectly still 4K image that tracks in on a party, or looks really cinematic, or anything like that. It's just amazing what kind of options there are now with the way you're able to develop media. And so it's cool thinking about just the level or the simplicity that we'll be able to work in rendering or work in producing 360 or virtual reality footage or drone footage 10 years on from now. Like if you think about it for a moment, like 10 years ago, it was pretty hard to drop in high definition footage onto your laptop or computer to like render out. 2008, April 2008, May 2008. That was still like a pretty it was starting to happen. HD or amateurly recorded HD footage was starting to happen, but really it was pretty rare to get HD cameras on the market for inexpensive prices in that era. It was still all standard definition stuff. I mean, while I was in college doing new media stuff, all the camera project, or all the video projects that we worked on were all in standard def. It was really an interesting invention that we switched over to 16:9 for a lot of the standard output of a lot of the files that we'd render. When I started, the first camera, like the first camcorder I was really working with was a Canon XL1 in like the 2002 to 2006-07 era. And man, a fantastic camera. I think there was like a lot of documentaries that were put together with that. It was a real workhorse kind of professional camera. And I was really fortunate to be a person in Southern Oregon getting to work with that level of video technology back in the early 2000s. It was really a cool opportunity that I had. And then kind of thinking about that now, just the level of like, wow, okay, so we moved on from standard definition. We moved on from the 4:3 aspect ratio. We moved on from tape media or from AVI capture files and, capture card systems. And so all that's kind of transitioned into much simpler H.264 or ProRes file systems, the digital file systems that are easier to upload, easier to write to a computer, and amazing what processors can do now too, just in the level of work that they're able to output. And what's interesting is like so 10 years ago, the difficulty of rendering HD footage that we had, that's similar to now 10 years later in 2018, the difficulty I'm having trying to render out this 360 degree footage that's been recorded, and it's just so much data. You know, you can imagine it's like an HD video in front of you. Now this is a 4K video that's all around you, and it just seems like, you know, it just seems like dozens more. I don't know. It just seems like a way bigger file to render out. I guess that's really what it is. 4K files are real big, and for this virtual reality 360 thing, it really seems like you need that level of resolution so that when you look in any particular spot, you know, through like a VR headset, you get a full resolution image from that single vantage point that you're looking at. And when I was talking earlier about ventures, or, you know, business ventures that I'd like to incorporate into the 360 video idea, I was really thinking a lot about like wedding photography events. So, you know, there's wedding videographers, but I'm thinking now with like the release of just this season, the release of the GoPro 360 Fusion, which has I think it's like an integrated digital gimbal support. So as you move the camera around through three-dimensional space, the camera kind of digitally reacts to the motion that you've created, and so it sort of stabilizes that. So I guess consider you're walking and you're taking steps, and so you kind of have a trot to the motion of the camera. Well, I guess apparently this gimbal is supposed to, this digital gimbal doesn't you know, work in the real world, but it takes the video file and I guess it's able to gimbal it, whatever that means, but it's able to smooth that out and stitch it together so that you know, you kind of lose a lot of that shakiness to the video. I guess they've had stabilization for years, but apparently they're explaining at least that it might be a different level of it. So it might be an interesting thing to check out. But what I was hopeful to do was you know, try and do something where you'd record like a 360 video of, let's say, like a wedding ceremony, and then as an offer to a bride and groom, you give them a headset and you give them the 360 experience so that they can either, I guess, give that to family that wasn't there, perhaps. Really, that's just like a Facebook opportunity in a big way, like, because you can just share those videos. You know, share those videos online and kind of see them digitally through the browser, which is a really exciting thing about social media sharing. YouTube 360, Facebook 360, and I think Vimeo 360 are all video sharing platforms where you can view that content in a browser. I think Chrome works the best for it right now. I had a lot of trouble in Safari viewing 360 browser stuff, but real interesting stuff, and it's been kind of cool. I was trying to think though, yeah, like, oh, it'd be cool, yeah, set up set up a 360 video, and then years from now, you can come back. There goes a big truck. But years from now, you can come back and like put on goggles or view just everything that was happening at a wedding. But it's a really immersive experience. I thought it'd be kind of cool. So I guess all that's to say, I rented a GoPro 360 Fusion. I think it should be here this week. So I'm going to try and run through and put together like a portfolio of 360 images and 360 videos from a lot of the locations, you know, a lot of the natural outdoor landscape locations that I've sort of come to learn about over the last 10 years of doing landscape photography across Oregon and the Northwest. So I'm hopeful to try and do that over like the Memorial Day weekend. I think it's going to be kind of fun, trying to hit it hard.